afternoon and welcome to today's project. And today we're going to be taking a look at this rather nice Hitachi 3D Super Woofer stereo unit, portable stereo unit from around about 1988. It's a double cassette deck with high-speed dubbing and also an FM stereo radio with both FM, medium wave and I think long wave as well. Now, the one problem with the unit is the playback. So this one's actually a TRK-3D5E, but the playback is not very good. There's a lot of woe and flutter on playback. Now, I initially, I'll be honest, I didn't know that you could actually just remove the top panel. So I initially removed the front panel, which contains the speakers, so it's actually the speaker housing. And there is in total 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws holding it in. So they actually need an extra long screwdriver to get to them. So I adapted one of my old screwdrivers, and I managed to get the speaker housing out, as you can see here. So I managed to separate that. You can also remove some of the wiring plugs from the main board at the top of the machine to get the speaker housing off as well and just give you a bit more free rein. There is on the front panel a graphic equalizer board which also contains the 3D switch, and the 3D switch brings in those two subwoofer speakers. So the outer speakers are 4 watt, I think 8 ohm affairs, and the inner ones are 20 watt 16 ohm affairs. Actually, it might be the other way round, but the inner ones are definitely two 20 watt speakers. Now, once you've got that front panel removed, you can actually separate the whole front speaker housing from the main unit, so you can actually get into the rest of the deck. Now, the cassette panel itself is held in underneath this top panel. And with the top panel removed, you've actually got access to all of the circuit boards underneath, including those little rocker switches. It's actually a good idea to have some contact cleaner on standby so you can give all those rocker switches a bit of a clean up. They actually pull off, as you can see here, and they do a very good job of keeping dust out of the machine, despite there being sort of no rubber seal or anything like that. So what I did was I actually removed them and just gave them a bit of a clean up. Now you can see there I'm just focusing on the underside of the top cover, and you can see the mechanism that deals with the tuning. So you need to keep that in the same position because it is in a very specific position at the moment. And you can see that tuner module is next to the AM aerial, which is inside the machine. Now what I did was I gave the whole area a bit of a vacuum just to get rid of any dust, and I discovered that the actual cassette unit, the double cassette unit, is held in with 6 screws, and once you remove those 6 screws you've got access to the whole chassis itself. Now you have to remove this little LED board here so you can get the wiring loom out, because it goes around a little post there, and once you've got that removed you've got access to the whole unit. Now there are in total 4 belts and a single motor, and those belts are held in by the main capstan there, and on the capstans there is the sort of little split pin clip thing which locks the capstan into place. If you pop that off, and you have to be very careful with a flat blade screwdriver to pop it off, you can remove the capstan. Now, one of the problems with this machine was I had quite a lot of rubbing, and the rubbing was causing a number of problems with sound reproduction. Now, the rubbing actually turned out to be a little plastic locating pin which sits on a little metal post. On that metal post sits a spring, and on the metal post sits a little plastic locking lug thing, and then on another post sits a little spring with a plastic cap, and that basically allows you to press pause and have the pause button stay down, and then you unpause and it flicks over and obviously comes back into life again. And what was happening with this is the little plastic thing had split, and over the years had gradually sort of come up the post and was eventually only being held in by the presence of the capstan. So what I did was I actually removed on both sides. I removed that little pause mechanism. So you can press pause, but to keep it paused now you have to hold down pause. So eventually what I'll have to do is strip the deck down again and actually replace that. I could probably fix it with a bit of glue, but it'll involve applying a little bit of super glue and keeping it weighed down so that it actually stays in place and doesn't make contact with the flywheel. So what I did was I put all the belts on, and on the motor there are sort of effectively two pulleys, and if you look at the capstan flywheels, they are slightly different. So one is slightly taller than the other, which allows you to run the belt onto the lower of the motor's pulleys. And there is a second belt that goes onto the underside of the capstan flywheel, which engages those two cogs that you can see there for the take-up spool. So that obviously operates the fast forward and rewind facility on the machine. What I also did was I used a bit of grease to grease up the mechanism on the actual machine, the cogs. So applying a little bit of grease just basically sort of got those cogs, you know, sort of just gently greased up, so that reduced a lot of the noise from the actual deck as well. The other thing that you might want to do is just give everything a bit of a clean, and you've got this metal bar here which I think is to do with activating record. It seems to sort of interface with that record button, and there's a switch on the actual main board itself, so you might want to just put a bit of grease around the two screws that hold that bar in place. Mine was suitably greased, so I didn't actually touch it, to be honest with you. You can also take the opportunity to clean up the two audio heads on both decks, and that's really sort of all that you need to do. The other problem I had with this deck is the two lids, the cassette lids on the top cover. One of them has a minute piece of plastic broken away from it, but because it's broken away at the hinge point, it doesn't actually sit properly into the case anymore. So what I have to do is I have to open up the first cassette housing and then lift up the other one just to get a cassette into there. It's something, to be honest with you, that I can live with, but it certainly is if another one of these came up, say sort of spares or repair or just was complete scrap, then it is something I would like to get repaired. I might have a look at actually sort of just trying to melt a bit of plastic into that little hole, smooth it off, and see if I can actually repair it that way, as it is quite a nice feature to have the tape lids both sort of come up, so you can obviously put a tape in there. Reassembly was a bit fiddly because I couldn't quite work out how the handle went in, and after a couple of false attempts, let's say, I worked out that the handle actually sort of goes in, the two brackets for the handle actually go in from the front of the machine, and then the handle sort of clips into those two metal brackets. Then the lid goes on top, and you just need to make sure that all of the wiring is tucked out of the way and it's not snagging on anything. Because the thing that can sort of happen is, you know, the wiring could get snagged and you could have a bit of a problem when putting everything back together. Thankfully, I managed to get it back together, so it wasn't too much of an issue. The other thing that caught me out as well was when I was putting the front speaker housing back on. So the subwoofer is held in with two screws. So you put your little board with the graphic equalizer and 3D button in first. Then you put the speakers on top of that, and there are two screws that you need to screw in top and bottom. And then you've got another couple of screws that you put into the board to hold the board in the unit. And what I actually found, and this threw me a little bit, was I noticed that there were two missing screws on the actual subwoofer unit itself, on the actual subwoofer. And I then suddenly realised that they tied in with the two screws that go into the back of the actual stereo set itself. So I put the speaker housing back on, flipped it over, and then I was able to screw everything back together. And those two screws, one in the battery compartment, one on the other side of the battery compartment, they actually sort of brought everything back together and sort of locked everything in place. The final thing that I did was then I chucked in a cassette, in this case again using my Diamond Life cassette, and made sure that everything played back, that I could fast forward and rewind, and that I didn't have any more annoying woe and flutter. And to be perfectly honest with you, everything was pretty good. The whole unit functioned far more effectively than it did previously, and it's probably going to be quite a while again before I have to change those belts. The belts that were in there, they looked okay, but they were very dry and very brittle. They didn't have much elasticity left, so they probably would have been slipping, to be honest. And also, coupled with the issue I was having with that pause facility, replacing them was certainly a very good thing to do. And anyway, I'm quite pleased to have the working unit. It's one of the more interesting things in my collection. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to hit that like button, and also consider subscribing for more upcoming fascinating hobbies. Thanks for watching.